Hey guys, it's time for my 100% original series where I dress as a cop and pick apart the content and character of another YouTuber. Original character, do not steal. Okay, but seriously, I'm probably never gonna do this again. I just feel like there's a certain someone who needs to be exposed. Now, I'm not saying that you can't like Doug's videos, that's fine if you do, I don't really care. I'm just here to share some juicy gossip and expose this bald fuck for the cretin he really is. It's long overdue a third party makes some sort of expose on Doug, and I'm just the girl for the job. I was there from the beginning. I remember it all. Every bit of drama, every scandal, every bad financial decision. I know everything.
Y'all wanna get a taste, yeah?
Doug Walker, better known online as the Nostalgia Critic, is actually a pretty important figure in the world of online videos. He pioneered the genre of video movie reviews. Now, he of course happened to hit the scene at exactly the same time as the far more talented, angry video game nerd, and it's often been thought that Doug simply ripped him off. Now, that's debatable, and it is possible they just got incredibly similar ideas at about exactly the same time. When Doug first hit the internet, what he was doing was pretty much a novelty, which helped him grow in popularity. In order to avoid YouTube's copyright claim system, Doug, along with a few business partners, created thatguywiththeglasses.com, a fairly successful little website that hosted not only his own videos, but an entire group of reviewers using a very similar formula. That site no longer exists. They moved to a new site known as Channel Awesome, but ironically have come full circle and mostly rely on YouTube these days. Aside from that, Doug Walker is also a skin-crawlingly irritating, cringy, shrill, and unoriginal online personality who is actually one of the worst members of a genre he essentially created. He always tries to hide from his own personal failings and shifty behavior, but I think it's about time we really delve into this man and figured out who he actually is. The most well-publicized scummy thing Doug ever did is probably the gatorade incident. This was something that happened during the filming of Suburban Nights. Although the exact details are a little fuzzy, when this story originally came out back in the day, it was that some actress who was not related to the site was duct taped upside down on a crucifix. Now, years later, the version I'm hearing is that it was Elisa, and it was a wall she was taped upside down to. Here's the part I know for sure. The woman, whoever it really was, passed out, and the Walkers, in their infinite wisdom, did not allow this person to seek medical help and decided to just give them some Gatorade instead. You see what I mean when I say the guy's selfish?
Yeah, that was something really missing from this year, was Doug hanging us all in the upside down crucifix position.
Don't worry, we got Gatorade, so it was okay.
The production of these things in general was just a mess. People were getting injured, shady shit was going down all the time. For example, this one guy on the site, Phalis, did a lot of the special effects work for Suburban Nights. When To Boldly Flee came around, they asked him to do it again, and they said they would actually pay him this time. But I guess when Doug has to give up some of his sweet dough is when things get really serious, because he was a whiny bitch about the entire situation. And you might think, well, he just hired someone to do work on his project. How can you be shady about that? He started gossiping that Phelan had, quote, half-assed these special effects, which is laughable considering the effects Doug did on his own.
And the answer to your question is...
So you're probably thinking, well, is there anything a little more scummy than that? I mean, I still like the guy, so average scummy isn't really gonna do it for me. Well, how about the way in which Obscurus Lupa, aka Alison Pregler, was let go from the site? You see, at Channel Awesome, if you're away from your computer for 15 minutes, your ass is done. So a little backstory, apparently the higher-ups, Doug Walker, his brother Rob, and the CEO, Mike Mashad, had been being kind of hypocritical with Lupa and unclear about the rules of Patreon and some other things. And she wanted to talk about it, And so this is an excerpt from her statement on why she left the site. 2 hours later, I'm away from the computer, and Mike creates a new convo with me, him, and Doug. He asks if I can talk now. I don't answer because, again, I am away from the computer. He waits approximately 15 minutes and then tells me because I'm ignoring them, they're taking my stuff off the site and letting me go. My stuff is immediately removed. Fuck, I love Allison. I always have. I mean, that's not true. I haven't always. See, when I was like 15, I really hated her because I had like a huge crush on Phaelus and she was dating Phaelus. But then I actually started watching her stuff and slowly I realized that I fucking loved her. Oh, and by the way, did you know that none of the producers were actually paid to act in Doug's little ego trip movies? Oh, but it's okay because they got a free trip and exposure. Except not really. No, you see, they were actually contractually obligated to film crossover reviews with each other and hand all the money over to Channel Awesome to pay for their trip. Keep in mind, even though they like to act like it was the other way around, these people were doing Doug a favor by being in these videos. And while they were in these videos, they couldn't film videos of their own, aka earn a living. The next thing, though, really helped me to cement just what a scumbag Doug Walker really was, just because of how transparent it was. This, of course, was the art contest. Yes, Doug ran an art contest where the winner would get $100 and their work featured as the DVD cover to one of his shitty projects.
The kind of stuff that we usually look for, if you look at our past artwork, we sort of like the more Drew Struzan, big, epic.
Drew Struzan level. $100. I mean, if you're lucky enough to win, of course. What an entitled asshole.
Oh, bitch, I wish you would.
Doug is now, and has always been, a giant narcissist. He really thinks he makes just breathtakingly good content. I mean, go back and watch his announcement that they were looking for new talent on the site, and you'll see exactly what I mean. How great he thinks his own shit is. Whether that be his Nostalgia Critic reviews, his anniversary movies, or his cringe-inducing sketches. And why shouldn't he? He gets nothing but praise. His business partners, his brother, even big names like Don Bluth and the Animaniacs creators just seem to love sucking his dick. Oh, Doug, your videos, it's so good. Oh my god. This has ironically created a man, a critic, who cannot take criticism. The first sign that Doug was an egomaniac was his original website. Named after himself, despite supposedly being a whole company or team of reviewers, the logo was of course a picture of his face, and his, at the time, 3 serieses, Nostalgia Critic, Ask That Guy, and Bum Reviews, always took precedent on the site's main page over other creators. That guy with the glasses did very little to promote the other creators on their site, and there were a lot of them, probably a lot more than the average person really ever realized. But I doubt the average visitor could name any besides Linkara, Spoonie, Nostalgia Chick, and really, Lindsay was only known because she was a counterpart to Doug. Case in point, the other 2 women who won that talent search along with her never gained the same notoriety. Another thing Doug and co were supposed to do was make up little bios with write-ups of each producer. They had them write them out several times, but they never materialized. Something that always bothered me personally was the fact that Welshie, the guy responsible for Nostalgia Critic gaining an audience at all, was never publicly credited for that, and even on the site itself was always relegated to obscurity. Now, despite Nostalgia Critic always being the main focus of the site, Doug himself didn't seem to understand how that actually impacted his fellow reviewers. What I mean is, okay, so like me back in the day, I used to visit that site like every day, and there were actually several creators I liked a lot more than Nostalgia Critic. Phaelus, Nostalgia Chick, Todd in the Shadows, all way more entertaining to me at the time. But most people weren't like that. Most people were there to see Nostalgia Critic, and of course that was originally what brought me there, too. So, you know, they'd look at other videos that were released recently, if they felt like it, but It was really just spillover from Nostalgia Critic's fanbase. So when Doug decided to retire his Nostalgia Critic series, he either didn't realize or didn't consider how this would affect literally everybody else on the site. Unsurprisingly, after the announcement, the site's traffic dropped dramatically. Other producers, such as Obscurus Lupa, were struggling to even pay their bills. But nobody cared, because even though they were running a company, Doug's happiness and creative whims took precedent over every other person. His movies. Anniversary specials. Now, besides the great irony that a website dedicated to making fun of bad movies made 3 of the most low-budget, low-quality, badly written excuses for comedy in the history of ever, these movies are also just a massive monument to Doug Walker's unmeasurable ego. The whole novelty of the anniversary specials were getting to see all these different reviewers who are normally miles and miles apart and not really connected beyond being on the same site all together. They're nothing more than that, and excuses for jokes, and at first glance, fan service. But if you dig a little deeper, you'll see that aside from Doug, there really isn't much fan service. Doug and Rob, his brother, wrote the scripts and made sure to give the fellow cast members as little to do as possible. Instead, they're all about Doug, which is fine that he's the main character. He was the face of the website after all, but it's to an absurd degree. For example, this guy, who worked behind the scenes on the site, is given more screen time in Suburban Nights than a ton of the other contributors. Why? Well, he made an appearance in one Nostalgia Critic video, which was actually a pretty old video when this came out. But still, that small connection to the Nostalgia Critic series naturally makes him much more valuable than anybody else, which really only furthers the idea that Doug and Rob and everybody else involved knew full well people were more familiar with his body of work than anybody else's, to the point where they would recognize this guy before they recognized half the cast. Now, the third and worst of these movies, To Boldly Flee, was supposed to be the big send-off to the Nostalgia Critic. Because of this, it reeks of arrogance and is totally unenjoyable to watch. Despite how stupid the entire premise is, it takes itself bizarrely seriously, and every single second is a reminder of how brilliant a writer, actor, and director Doug believes himself to be. Despite the fact that much of the plot revolves around plot holes, a term Doug, a film critic, doesn't even seem to know the definition of. Also, the movie is unfunny. It looks like shit, almost every idea in it is stolen from somewhere else, and it's riddled with continuity errors. Which, you know, aren't the same as plot holes. Connected to these videos is the long-running theory that Doug did not actually watch the videos of anyone who produced content under the channel Awesome name, and that is made no more clear than in how Doug actually wrote the other producers. I mean, the whole novelty was seeing all of your favorite reviewers in one place, but most of them were just written as essentially clones of Walker himself. He didn't take into consideration their different personalities or even their own styles of humor, possibly because he didn't even know what they were. A no better example of this is Matthew Buck. Matthew ran a show called Bad Movie Beatdown, which is pretty similar to any video reviewer you'd see nowadays. He had a sarcastic, dry, and sometimes downright pissed off tone in his videos. What he most certainly was not was a smiling, airheaded goofball. Where this characterization came from, I have no idea, but that's always how he was portrayed in the anniversaries. Or how about Dr. Insano in Kick-Assia? This is supposed to be a big fan service moment where Spoonie turns into Insano, but from what I recall, Insano was a different character than Spoonie. Also in Kick-Assia, Nostalgia Chick spends a huge chunk of the movie doing this bizarre and totally out of place Sarah Palin impression, which of course has nothing in the slightest to do with her videos. I especially feel bad for this guy. I don't know what content he made on that guy with the glasses, but in this movie he has one joke, which is one line he says several times, and that's all he does. You might think this stuff is no big deal, but keep in mind that a big incentive for people to even do these specials, and something that Doug sold them on, was exposure. I mean, imagine some kid is watching Suburban Nights, and they just love this goofy dumbass Phelis who talks to action figures or whatever the fuck he did in that movie. And they decide they're gonna check out his videos. And then, he's nothing like that at all. Not the best exposure, is it? Doug is very proud of these specials, however, as well as some shit he made when he was a teenager, which is why he considers himself a filmmaker. But the sad truth is, they just look like garbage. Not only do they look cheap, not only are they shot totally amateur, they aren't even funny. Every joke Doug writes is predictable, unsubtle, and childish. Much like Lele Pons, he relies on being loud a lot of the time, and much like Family Guy, he will confuse a reference with a joke. Suburban Nights comes the closest to being good, but that has much more to do with the fact that it's a group of friends who all genuinely enjoy each other's company, and that just kind of emanates off the screen. Everything that's written is just dumb, cheap gags. You might think I'm being overly harsh, but they aren't even good compared to other YouTube stuff. They aren't as creative as something like Filthy Frank. They don't have the polished and professional look of something like Smosh. They lack the personality of something like Most Popular Girls in School, and they aren't as artistic as something like Ralph the Movie Maker's films. Even compared to things of similar circumstance and budget, they fail. But no, Doug uses these as proof that he's a real filmmaker and he knows what he's talking about. But even more laughable than that is the fact that he is so goddamn proud of his Nostalgia Critic series. He thinks it looks amazing. God damn, everything just looks awful. Everything is just a cheap Halloween costume, and their use of green screen doesn't even come close to looking integrated. They always look like they're on a green screen with some Photoshop or poorly drawn background. I mean, look at this. Doug is actually proud of this. He thinks it looks good. Newsflash, it looks like folded pieces of paper. It doesn't look like mouse ears, it looks like paper. It doesn't look like ears made of paper either, it just looks like paper. And I know, it seems like I'm being harsh, like, oh come on, it's just an internet video, but like, it's because of how much Doug just jerks himself off to this stuff. I mean, yeah, it's an internet review. Well, take a look at the man he swindled and accused of half-assing, Phelis. Phelis' videos, even his old ones, are leagues above this. His special effects always blend in really well. In fact, a lot of his stuff looks downright seamless. So much so that Phelis will often fuck with the footage of movies he reviews, and a lot of people can't even tell he's done it. Doug, meanwhile, everything he's ever done looks like Photoshop garbage. His cool rock and roll intro is laughable. I mean, these are the clips Doug is supposedly the most proud of, and they're fucking low quality trash. Doug's reviews are of course nothing more than summaries with jokes with a tiny little actual review squeezed in at the end. This would honestly be fine if he didn't think of himself as this great film critic. The other thing is, even though he invented this style of review, so many people have taken it and just done so much more than Doug could ever even hope to. Doug is a good riffer. He is not a good film critic. He doesn't even seem to understand the medium of film very well, either from a film studies or production standpoint. A lot of times things just go right over his head. Like, basic things a child could get. These are children's movies, after all. For example, he reviewed this movie called The Garbage Pail Kids. Basically, the whole moral of the movie is, beauty is on the inside. In the movie, the main kid is in love with this bitchy teenage girl who uses him for the clothes she thinks he's designing. At the end of the movie, we get this line.
I don't think you're pretty anymore.
So, believe it or not, Doug actually thinks that this line goes against the message of the movie. The other thing is, the bad movie is always far funnier than Doug himself, or at the very least, his reactions are funnier than his more drawn-out jokes. Like, remember his review of The Room? Yeah, you know, making fun of Tommy Wiseau's accent and reacting to all the crazy shit that happened in this movie. Well, do you remember this part?
Seahorses rule the earth now. Complete domination. Surprised nobody saw it coming, really.
Probably not. I mean, I do, because even at the time, I couldn't believe how unfunny and lame it was, so I guess I stored it in my memory. I mean, seriously, this is peak lol random. Family Guy would reject this joke. At least if they did it, the seahorses would be well animated. Speaking of poorly animated, what about his viral hit, the brilliantly titled Pinky and the Brain Swearing? It's exactly what you think it is. It's Pinky and the Brain dropping F-bombs. There's literally no other joke. Like, you had Maurice LaMarche and Rob Paulson, the original voice actors, willing to do this, and this is all you can come up with. Ooh, let's have them say bad words, because it's kids' show. Gosh, never seen that before, except for Robot Chicken, Mad TV, and about 1 billion YouTube videos made by 12-year-olds. Doug Walker is a man who believes that the word monkey, like, just the way it sounds, is funny. And so he tries to, like, include it in dialogue. This is a 4-year-old's idea of comedy. The man is just so cringe. He's the cringe king, and for some reason, he gets away with it. Like, it seems like reviewers in general just get away with, like, a larger percentage of cringe than the average person. I have no idea why this is. I mean, look at his comment section. Like, even people with, like, really big, dedicated fan bases, they still have negative comments, but look at Doug. Like, he has this whole new generation of fans who are probably not even aware that there ever was a thatguywiththeglasses.com, and they fucking love him so much, they just eat up everything he does. They just fucking sit there in the comments and suck his dick all day long. And they don't realize that he's the fucking cringe king. Like, he's this bald, screeching ape. He's the fucking cringe king, and they don't even fucking know it. But even with all these fans, and people don't like Doug. They don't think he's funny, and I know they don't think he's funny, because every time he tries to do something like demo reel or his Hocus Pocus video or anything where he doesn't have a movie to bounce off of, people hate it. They reject it en masse. Demo reel was fucking awful. But more importantly, demo reel proved that even Doug's most diehard fans didn't find him the least bit charming, likable, or funny. It was all about the reviews. That's all he's good for as far as the internet is concerned. He didn't want it to be true, but eventually he had to give up the ghost and go back to Nostalgia Critic. And of course, to do that, he had to tie it into demo reel. Well, no, he didn't, because nobody was watching demo reel, but I guess he thought that he had some brilliant fucking idea. So his idea was like, oh, what if the guy from demo reel was actually the Nostalgia Critic all along? So when Phaelus made a joke on his Twitter account that he was going to reveal that he and Sub-Zero had been the same person the entire time, Doug, of course, threw a hissy fit and made him delete it. And of course, the joke stealing. Doug often talks about how his inspiration for the Nostalgia Critic character was Daffy Duck, but it goes beyond that. Demo Reel and To Boldly Flee are just full of stolen jokes. And every plot point in To Boldly Flee was lifted from some other movie. What it reminds me of the most is like Epic Movie or those Family Guy Star Wars episodes, but somehow even worse. Doug's little channel Awesome is more than just a YouTube channel and a site nobody visits. It's a company. A totally mismanaged company run by 3 men, Doug Walker, his brother Rob, and this guy, Mike Mashad. Mashad is, by all accounts, the absolute worst of the 3. Where to begin with this guy? Lackluster response to sexual harassment, lies and unkept promises, physical confrontations with coworkers, still playing the popularity game even when it came to honoring a contributor who had passed away. Let's start with Holly. Holly Brown was Channel Awesome's HR girl. She worked with them for years, but they decided to fire her literally the day after she got out of surgery. That's scummy on its own, but keep in mind, this is in America. okay? They don't have universal health care down there. And working for Channel Awesome, you know she sure as fuck wasn't getting any benefits. She also had to sign a non-compete, so she couldn't work in the industry for like 3 whole years. Doug was actually the deciding vote to fire her, and the reason was that her surgery was preventing her from getting work done. So if you're running a site where a bunch of people are posting their pre-approved, thematically similar content, you might think a certain level of communication would be necessary. But you would be wrong. No, obviously email lists are stupid, and the best form of communication is a Skype group chat, because, you know, nobody ever misses anything in a group chat. And just in case they don't get the message right away, aggressively confronting them in person to the point of tears is always a good option. Or, who could forget the famous story of Blistered Thumbs, an offshoot site of That Guy with the Glasses? The contributors to that site found out it was shutting down the same day as the public did, through the same public posting. Oh, and let's not forget that the other contributors to That Guy with the Glasses found out about Nostalgia Critic, the main source of traffic to the site, ending the exact same way. I mean, you wouldn't want to give people a heads up on that sort of thing. That's not how you run a business. Oh, and of course there was the thing of consistently getting people's video titles or description links wrong. Yeah, at That Guy with the Glasses, you couldn't just post your own videos. You had to, like, send them in, and they would post them with the title and description you told them to, supposedly. So, what if I told you that once upon a time, there was a guy working for the site who was even worse than Mike Mashad, even worse than the Walkers? Well, that would be Mike Ellis. But, I mean, how bad could he really be? I mean, it's a silly little website, right? Well, here's an account from just one former contributor. One night in particular, after a call, Ellis kept messaging me afterwards on Skype. This wasn't unusual. We'd usually just BS about stuff. However, he was supposedly intoxicated. I say supposedly because that's the excuse I heard later. But he was typing very coherently, not one misspelled word during our conversation. What started as a simple enough conversation quickly became very uncomfortable. He kept asking me more personal details, eventually going full into, I heard from a little birdie that you were gay. Oh, I heard you were at least bi. Oh, so you're just curious about guys then? Really pushing as if he was fishing for something. This conversation quickly turned very one-sided and even more uncomfortable as he went on telling me all the things he wanted to do to me, the things he wanted me to do to him. Just give him a shot, he said. This went on for 2 hours. For these 2 hours, I typed not one word to him. But he had this entire conversation with himself, and multiple times tried the whole, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you off tactic on me, as if it was going to make things better. I messaged Mashad telling him, look what this guy's doing, I'm super freaked out. And keep in mind, I believe this was just before the anniversary brawl. The only thing I ever heard from Mashad was, damn it, I told him he couldn't be doing this shit, I'll take care of it. And then, it was never spoken of again. I never heard from Ellis again, and I have zero idea if that was part of the reason he was fired from the company or not. He kept calling me his sexual cupcake. What the fuck is that? No kidding. After those hours of him talking to himself, he finally gave up talking to me. But he did make one last-ditch effort to hit on me, and it by far was the worst pickup line I've ever been given. Hey, 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 hey Sean, hey Cupcake, do you like Seinfeld? Mike Ellis was apparently so unhinged and dangerous, at one point after he was let go, the Walker brothers felt it necessary to escort Holly to a temporary safe house with weapons in hand.
Gotta get the coin and I gotta get it quick.
Doug Walker fraudulently crowdfunded $90,000. Now, let me back up. Doug Walker put up an IndieGoGo project to raise money for some new shows they wanted to produce, including a game show and another series that never saw the light of day. Now, Besides having some absolutely insane reward tiers like $500 for a Skype call, the project seemed mostly whatever. That is, until a couple years went by and none of these shows had come out. It was so bad that they were actually investigated by IndieGoGo, and so, to avoid legal trouble, they crapped out the gloriously unwatchable Pop Quiz Hotshots. The sets are just cardboard boxes. It looks like a little kid made it. Look at those fucking name cards. The game is just answering Trivia Pursuit questions, only it's just the pop culture category, and the edition is $19.99. Oh right, and they're all really easy. Oh, but that's just round 1, then you get to play Go Fish. Ooh, like Jesus Christ, it's just Go Fish. Who would want to watch this? There's a game show out right now based on Candy Crush, but they knew that would be boring to watch, so they made the Candy Crush giant. Why isn't this giant Go Fish, or like, even Messy Twister? Or Deadly Twister? No. But seriously, you know why this isn't giant Go Fish? Because that wouldn't be in the clearance section at Walmart. The host is Brad Jones, who, I don't know if he just really didn't want to be here, or if he's trying to do his super low-key cinema snob character, but either way, I mean, I normally like the guy quite a bit, but this is just anti-charisma. I mean, look at this. The host is bored, the contestants are bored. Then there's this character, Miss Stockholm. She's supposed to be a sexy co-host. Why sexy? Maybe because Doug Walker can't write women? Or anyone? Maybe she's supposed to be a parody of Vanna White? Either way, she's a perfect example of how much they just did not give a shit. No effort whatsoever. I mean, if she's supposed to be some sort of sexy bombshell, why is she wearing this granny top with her hair in like a tomboyish ponytail? If I was going to dress someone as a sexy bombshell character, she'd have fucking big hair, tons of makeup. I mean, even a blonde wig could have helped to sell this a little more. But no, they just didn't care. Look at this and tell me it cost $90,000 to produce. Did they lie about why they needed the money? Well, it's possible. According to Holly, Channel Awesome was totally in the red right around the same time, and they allegedly used most of the money to pay off debt. But as a longtime fan, Doug has simply not improved at all. Despite what Doug himself will tell you, his comedy style is beyond juvenile. He still can't make real film critiques. His editing and effects are bad, the sketches only drag his reviews down. Every other YouTuber who started around the same time as him has evolved. They've either branched out, their humor evolved. Doug, though, he's actually even worse than when he started. It's embarrassing that he's still the representative of YouTube reviews. So that's my video on Doug Walker and Rob Walker and Channel Awesome, and decide for yourself if you think that they're scummy and if you want to keep supporting them. I don't care. Decide for yourself. And, you know, subscribe for more content, cuck. Just kidding. I normally make video essays and shit. Hey everybody, I'm trying to talk really loud so that I can drown out this traffic noise behind me. I need something from you, and that is to click the button that says subscribe, and you have to click it. It's not a negotiable thing anymore. I was nice before, but now there's only one option, and that's to subscribe to the channel, that's to like the video, that's to leave a comment telling me how awesome you think I am, and how amazing I am, and how I deserve more views, and how you're freaking astonished that I only have like 357 subscribers, or however many there are at this point in time.